Hi and welcome. In this video I am going to show you how I knit these mittens. The construction of the mittens is the same as on a Selbu mitten or a Norwegian mitten. They have ribbed cuff like this. They have thumb gusset, and the thumb itself is pointy, and the same is the mitten here, the tip of the mitten. I am going to show you step by step how I make the mittens, and if you look in the video description you will find a link to free pattern that you can also follow for these exact mittens. But you don't have to use my pattern. You can use this video as aid when knitting other mitten patterns with similar construction as these mittens. And as they are constructed as a traditional Norwegian mitten, they can be great to use as practice if you want to learn how to knit these type of mittens, but you are not yet comfortable with knitting mittens in stranded color work, because here you only have one yarn to worry about. So I will just get started, and all information about yarn and needles and measurements you will find in the pattern in the link in the video description. So let's get started. Here I have my set of needles and my yarn, so I am ready to cast on. And there are many methods to choose between when you cast on for a project, but I am going to show you my favorite for rib. And I start by making a slip knot like this. I put one needle through and I pull gently just to make this first stitch sit close around the needle, but not too tight. My yarn end, I hide that one, and then I begin to cast on. And I hold my yarn between my thumb and my middle finger like this, and I use my index finger and I start underneath the yarn and I move up and I twist so that I make a loop around my index finger. I take my needle and I place on top of the yarn and move it down to the tip of my finger, and I slip the loop onto my needle and I pull the yarn until the stitch sits close to the first one. But I don't tighten it too much because it'll get difficult to work the first round. So I will show you one more time. I hold my yarn between my thumb and middle finger, index finger underneath the yarn and up, twist, needle on top of the yarn and down to the tip of my finger, slip the yarn onto the needle and pull. And I will continue to cast on until I have the number of stitches on my needle that I want. And then I pick up a new needle. I usually place it underneath the needle I have already stitches on, like this. And I secure it here with my fingers. And I simply continue to cast on in the same way. I make sure the first stitch on my new needle here sits close to the last stitch on the last needle. And I will continue to cast on all 4 needles, and I will get back to you when I start knitting. I am finished with the cast on, and I have now distributed my stitches evenly on these 4 needles, and I am ready to start knitting. And in the first round, because of the method I used to cast on, the stitches are very easy to pull. They are very unstable. So take your time when you knit the first round. The reason why I like this method so much is that the cast on edge will become very elastic, and I also think it looks very good. And I will show you the result afterwards. But now I will start to knit the rib cuff, and I am going to make knit 1, purl 1 rib. So I just start to make sure I pick up all the yarn. Knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, and I continue like this throughout the whole round. And you may see here that I get this gap between my needles. If I pull the needles apart, it'll get worse, so try to avoid to pull the needles apart. If you have gotten a big space between the needles, try when you pick up the yarn to pull the stitch a bit. Make sure the stitch sits close to the last one, and try to keep a little bit of slack on the yarn between the needles. Then this little gap will follow you around the first round, and then in the next round, when all stitches are more secure or locked, it will disappear. And this instability now in the first round is also what makes the super elastic result. So I will continue now to knit 1, purl 1 in the round until my cuff has the length that I am looking for. And when it has, I will get back to you and show you the next step. My cuff is done. It has the length that I am looking for. And this is what the cast on edge looks like. And this is how stretchy it is. If you look closer. So it has no edge that stops the elasticity. And now next step is to start knitting stockinette. So I just knit the knit stitches and I knit the purl stitches, and you may notice now that when I knit the knit stitches, I stick my needle through from the left like this, but from the right on the purl stitches. This has to do with the purling technique that I use, and you of course should purl the way you are used to or the way you like. And what you should look for when if you wonder where to stick your needle when you pick up the stitch, is that in my purl stitch here, when I stick my needle through from the right, I open the stitch up like this. If I were to do the same thing as on the knit stitches, you can see here that the stitch gets twisted at the bottom. It looks like a triangle. And I don't want to twist knit my purl stitch. So therefore, I stick my needle in the way that I need to make the stitch open like this. It's the same thing for the knit stitch. When I pick it up like this, it opens up. If I pick it up from the right, as I did on my purl stitch, I twist it. This happens because my purling technique, which is like this, I find it fast and ergonomic to do. It twists the stitches. If I pull the stitches like this, you can see that they angle different in the different direction on the needle. So that is the reason. And only thing you have to remember is that the stitch has to open up like this when you pick it up, and not be a triangle like this. If this happens, you twist knit the stitch. So sometimes you are supposed to twist knit the stitch, but not here. Twisting the stitch makes it a little tighter. It's good for closing holes or making a rib firmer, for instance. This first round of stockinette, this is also the round where you change your needles. Sometimes you want to use slightly smaller needles on the rib so that the rib is not too loose, and then you go up 1/2 or 1 needle size when you knit the stockinette. I have used the needle size recommended for rib, so this is slightly smaller needles than recommended for stockinette with the yarn I'm using, but I am not going to change needles. I will continue with this size. The reason why is that the mitten will be made a little bit tighter, because when I use my mittens often do work outside, and maybe I handle things that are snowy or wet. If it is a little tighter, it keeps in shape better, and the yarn doesn't stretch as much. I think they keep their shape a lot better then. And so now I have done the first round of stockinette. In the next round I am going to increase a couple stitches. I try to distribute my increases evenly on my round. So I will show you how I usually do my increases. I think I will have one here. And I will pick up the yarn that goes between two stitches. The strand on top, that is almost like a bridge between the stitches. I pick it up and I place it on my needle so that it starts on the top left and angles down towards the right. I use my right needle and I stick it through the yarn like this. Needles change places and I knit. And now I twist knitted this yarn I picked up. And I can show you again. I pick up the yarn, I place it onto my needle like this. If I just knitted like this, I would get a hole in my work. But if I twist, you can see the yarn crosses here at the bottom. Then this hole closes like this. So when I look at my work, you almost can't tell where the increase is. So I will do one more increase and then I will continue for a couple of rounds in stockinette before I come back and show you how I do my thumb gusset increases. I have now done a few rounds in stockinette, as you can see here, and I am now ready to begin the thumb gusset. And I usually place the thumb on the opposite side of where the round begins. This mitten does not have any pattern. It's only one color, so it's not really that important. But if when I do stranded color work mittens, I always make the thumb on this side when my round begins on this side, because the join between the beginning and the end of the round often has different height of the stitches, so it will become, the pattern will become slightly uneven along the join between the rounds here. And if I have my thumb up here, the join will end up here on the other side, and I usually carry my hand like this, so it will not be as visible as if the join of the pattern was on the top of my hand here. So it is to conceal that uneven join. And so again, not as important when it's only one color, because it really won't show, but I just do this as a habit. So this is the left mitten. So I will have the thumb up here like this, join there, thumb up here, and I will use a piece of leftover yarn to make a marker so that I know where my thumb gusset begins. So the first and the last stitch here will be the edges of my gusset, and I will show you how I increase. My increases will be the first stitch after the edge here, and I will also increase before the last stitch here. And I will do this every time to make it look even. Always the first stitch after the edge on the right side, and always the last stitch before the edge on the left side. So I will just knit this stitch, and when I increase here after the edge on the right side, I pick up the top strand of yarn between the stitches here, and I place it on my left needle like this. It begins on the top left and it angles down towards the right. And then I do the same thing as I did when I did my increases before. Right needle through from right towards left, needles change place, and I twist knit the yarn I picked up. So that is the increase on the right side after the edge. Then I knit the stitches in between. For now it is only one. And now I will pick up the yarn on the left side, last stitch before the edge on the left side. I will place this stitch the opposite way, opposite direction on my needle. It begins down on the left and it angles up towards the right. And I twist knit this as well. I cannot do this because then I will create that hole I talked about earlier. So I twist, knit like this, and then I knit the edge. And here you have the first thumb gusset increase. And if you look closely, you will see that on the first increase, you can see you have this direction on the yarn here, and the opposite direction here. So by doing it this way, I make my increases symmetrical. If you choose to use one of the techniques and not differ between right and left, that is very okay. It's really not that visible. You have to look closely to see it. So if you think two different techniques are too much to focus on, that's fine. No one will notice unless they have a really close look. Now I am going to continue and make more increases. Always increase. I always increase on between the first stitch here and the second, and on the other side between the two last stitches, to keep the increases along the edge. And when I have done my increases, I will get back to you to show you what it looks like when it's finished and how to make the thumb hole. And here you can see the finished thumb gusset, and you can see that it angles out to the right here and left here. These are the edges. And now I'm ready to make the thumb hole so that I can finish the mitten. And what I do is that I control that I have the first stitch of the thumb here. Then I begin here with my marker. It's between these two stitches and I follow it up. Okay, so this is the first stitch of the thumb, and I do the same on the other side. Yes, so here I have the thumb stitches. I am going to transfer those stitches onto a stitch holder. In my case, this I use a hairpin. You can use safety pin. You can use there are products that are meant for this purpose called, I guess, stitch holders. But you can knit these stitches onto some leftover yarn. You can use anything that will work to keep these stitches while you finish the mitten. So that's the last stitch, and I will count them: 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. And the stitch numbers may vary depending on whether you are using my pattern or a different pattern. So always check the pattern you are following for stitch numbers, but here I have 11 and I have to replace those stitches by casting on new stitches. So I use the same technique that I did for the cuff. Make sure first stitch sits close to the last one here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have cast on fewer stitches than I put on my stitch holder. This is because I want to sort of save 2 stitches to pick up in the sides of the thumb when I'm making the thumb, and that is to avoid gaps that often occur in the sides of the thumb, and it also helps keep the main part of the mitten a little narrower so that the mitten doesn't get too wide. So now that I have my new stitches here, I can continue to knit my round. When I do the first stitch, I also make sure it sits close to the last stitch I cast on, and then I continue. I usually make the first stitch here a little tighter just to help avoid those gaps that you can get when you make the thumb. So I will just work my way around until I get to the thumb hole, so I can show you what it looks like and how I do when I knit the cast on stitches. So here it is, and you can see the gap here. This is the same thing that you have when working the first round on the cuff. So what I do is when I knit the first stitch, I just make sure again that it ends up very close to the last stitch on this needle. And to reduce this gap, I continue to place the stitches close, and I do not pull the needles apart like this. And I continue to work my new stitches. And now I have finished those, and when I knit the first stitch from the mitten itself here, the first stitch that is not from my new cast on, I also make that a little tighter. And now it looks like this. So I am quite satisfied with this. And I will continue to work in the round until the mitten is long enough and it is time to start decreasing for the tip of the mitten. And I will come back and show you that. And here is the mitten so far. And here you can see the thumb hole. And I have continued in the round until the mitten reached the right length for me. So if I put it on, it almost covers my fingers. And now I am going to start decreasing. And I am going to make a pointed tip like this. So it will look like from here, almost like a triangle, like this, this, and this. The same shape as the traditional Norwegian mittens, Selbu mittens, for instance. And I'm going to do 4 decreases in each round. And I have placed 1 marker in each side to help me remember where I should decrease. And this is the same in each side. There is a column here of 3 stitches, and I am going to make my decreases before and after. So I will just start and I'll show you as I go. So here I have the 3 stitches in one of the side bands or columns, and I'm going to decrease right after these 3 stitches. And when I make the decrease after these 3 stitches, I do it as follows. I slip the first stitch like this. I stick my needle through as if I am going to knit the stitch, and I slip the second stitch the same way. Then I use my left needle and I stick it through both stitches and I knit them together like this. And I continue to knit until I have 2 stitches left before the next marker. So here I have my marker around the 3 stitches, and when I decrease before the marker, I stick my needle through both stitches as if I were to knit, like this, through both stitches and knit them together. There is my second decrease. And I will continue throughout the round to show you one more time. And I knit the column of 3 stitches here. And now after the marker I slip 1 stitch, slip the second stitch, and I knit them together. And then I work my way over to the other 3 stitch column. Whoops. And here I have 2 stitches left, and I stick my needle through both and I knit them together. And then I need to knit the 3 stitches in this column to finish my round. And now you can see that I have started the tip of the mitten. You can see here that this decrease angles towards the tip, and this decrease also angles towards the tip, so they will meet in the middle at the end. So now I will continue to decrease like this in each round, and when I have only a few stitches left I will get back to you and show you how I finish the tip of the mitten. Most of the tip of the mitten is done. I have left the columns on each side, 3 stitches here in each side, and 3 stitches from the grip side and the top of the mitten. And now I'm going to show you how I do the last round of decrease and how I finish. So here I knit the last stitch of the column with 3 stitches, and here I have the decrease after the column. And I slip and I slip and knit those 2 stitches together as I have done before. I get rid of that needle, and this stitch I place onto my left needle, and the last stitch, this is the decrease before the column. I pick it up and pull it over and off the needle like this, and I place the stitch back onto the right needle. I knit the 3 stitches in the side column, and then I do the same. I slip, slip, and knit the 2 first stitches together, and the stitch here with the decreases before the column, and I place my stitch onto the left needle, pick up the decrease before the column, and I pull it over and off the needle. And then I can place this stitch back onto my right needle. And I knit the 3 stitches of the column again, and now I am finished. I have already cut the yarn, and what I do now is I knit 1 round, but for each stitch that I knit I pull my yarn end through. Like this. And to avoid big yarn loops here, when I pick up the next stitch, I pull it and tighten, then I knit. Pull the stitch when I pick it up, and I knit. And I continue. And here I have my last stitch. Only thing left now with the tip is to take the yarn end and put it through this hole in the tip so that it comes out on the wrong side, and then pull, and this is what it looks like. And next, thumb. So now I have found my needles again, and I'm ready to make the thumb. I begin with the stitches placed on my hairpin here, or the stitch holder, and I transfer them back onto my knitting needle. Like this. And then I pick up the stitches I cast on the other side of my thumb hole. And then I pick up the stitches I cast on the other side of the thumb hole. Six, 7, 8, 9 stitches. I have used 3 needles here because I have so few stitches that I think that you can use 4, but I think it's easier to stay organized with only 3 on this thumb. So I take my yarn and I stick it through the thumb hole. It comes out here. And I secure it just to make it easier to put some tension on the yarn without pulling it through. And I am ready to begin. And here I have the stitches from the stitch shoulder, and I will begin by knitting those. And I can let go of this now, because now I have secured my yarn here. And I am going to pick up 1 stitch in each side of the thumb hole. The first one will be here, and this is to of course get the right number of stitches for the thumb, but also to here in the sides it often it's easy to create holes. You see, if I just knit here, I get holes like this. And it's, to be honest, you can fix those with a needle and a little yarn when you're finished, but I will show you how to reduce the risk of making those holes to begin with. And that is by picking up stitches in the side. What I do is I begin here and I pick up not the top strand of yarn but the one underneath, and I twist it like this, and then I pick up the top strand of yarn, and so now I sort of have 2 stitches on my needle, and I take the left one and I slip it over, the right one, and slip it over the left one and off my needle like this. So that's the first step. And if I'm not satisfied with how this closes, I can go on the back here and pick up some more yarn, perhaps this one, and I place it onto my left needle and knit it together with the next stitch like this. So now I don't have any big holes, so I will continue to knit, and I will see in the next round what it looks like. So now I knit the stitches that I picked up from the other side of the thumb hole, the stitches I cast on. Like this, and I am here back at the beginning, but I am going to pick up 1 stitch here as well, the same way as I did on the other side. Pick up strand number 2 from the top, twist it, pick up the top strand of yarn, slip the first one over the second. I can do this, is going on to this side like this, and to make it the same as I did on the other side, I'm going to undo this last stitch here again, and I am going to pick up this, I think, and knit it together with the last stitch on this side. And here I have closed the gap. So there are more than one way of doing this, but here you have seen how I do to make sure I don't get holes. And you just have to, sometimes you just have to try and fail with where you pick up yarn to get the best closing of the holes in the side. I picked up this yarn again just to make sure I didn't pull the first stitch. So now I can simply continue to work my thumb in the round, and here I have the first side of the thumb where I tried to close the hole. Yeah, I think that's okay. Just a little one there. And you can also do some repairing after you're finished with a yarn end and a needle, sewing needle. And this is the other side. Yeah, so I'm quite satisfied with that result. So I will continue to work my thumb, and when I have the right length, I will decrease the same way as I did here for the tip. So I'm not going to actually show you the decrease here, because it is exactly the same way as here. The only difference is that usually on the thumb you don't have 3 stitches in the side columns. You have 1 or 2 usually, because there are so few stitches. But how you do it is exactly the same. And regarding stitch numbers, you either follow your pattern or you divide the stitches so that you have side column, and equal number of stitches on each side in between the columns. So that's it, and I will come back and show you the result when I have finished. And here we have the finished mittens. And you can either wear it like this or fold it like this to make it a little shorter. So thank you so much for watching. Have a nice day.